Daniel from Fingerprint Capital. We are a design and build company. We are here to educate you on the land buying process. It's very hectic to get land nowadays from a reliable seller or even for you to sell your land. So mostly we would advise you to engage an advocate. So joining me today is Edward Ngowe, an advocate of the High Court, and he's going to explain to us the details that you need to know so that you're able to buy land from a reliable source, or the details on how you're supposed to do your due diligence and get the entire information. So welcome, Edward.
Thank you for this opportunity, and greetings to everybody. As you rightfully put it, the land buying process has many hurdles and is quite challenging for even the seasoned of professionals. Inexplicably, land and land issues in this country have been quite emotive. They have been, they are, and will continue to be until we're able to resolve issues as to land ownership and illegal allocations of land and all that. Be that as it may, we all get the question of once you get that job, what is that first purchase you make? Is it going to be a car? Is it going to be a parcel of land? Is it going to be an apartment? What will you buy first? And of course, most people will find land as a sound investment, as their first big acquisition as they go through life. The land buying process in Kenya would be broken down into 3 phases. The first phase would be the pre-contract phase.
Yes.
You have the contract phase and the post phase.
Okay.
So we are going to break down these phases as we go. But essentially, when you talk about pre-contract, you talk about before you have any documentation signed between yourself and the seller of that property. The contract phase is where you actually sign the documentation and exchange monies in line with whatever is contained with the documentation. And the post-contract is after you've received the title and your ownership documents for that particular property. Yes.
Okay. So land is quite a big investment, cash flow wise, and in terms of value. So maybe you can tell us, who should you buy land from? Is it from companies, because we have companies who are advertising on the medias that they sell property, or is it an individual? Who would you advise us to buy land from?
There is no right or wrong answer to that question, because in essence, you should be buying land from the actual owner of that property.
Yes.
There are some benefits that come with buying land from a company vis-a-vis an individual, but all in all, you have to be buying land from the actual owner.
Yes.
The company has to be the owner, the individual has to be the actual owner.
Yes.
The one benefit of companies is that they have perpetuity. So they live beyond what a person could, and they have some separate they are a separate entity from the actual directors of the company. With individuals, there comes issues with family, trust relationships, consents and disagreements within families. People pass away during the process, so you may encounter hurdles when you're buying from an individual. Also, individuals may be easier to buy from because if you know the particular person, you know the family, you know the background, it's easier to inquire as to an individual as opposed to a company. So what we are saying is buy land from the actual owner, be it a company or an individual.
Okay.
Yes.
So putting in mind that now you're ready to buy land, what's the first step you should do? Maybe give us an overview of what you should do in terms of legally what you should do, the process, where you should start. Yes. And how you as a lawyer or an advocate can come in and assist that person.
Okay, thank you. Of course, the first step is financial preparedness. Organize your finances and of course
the value of the land that you want to buy.
Correct.
Yes.
Where you want to buy
the
it,
location.
the location.
Yes.
Just have an overview of all that. And of course, you're getting bombarded by all these adverts, right, left, and center, on your TV, on the road, on your phone, wherever. So, financial preparedness, and then seek out the land you want to buy. Where do you want to buy it? Why do you want to buy it? Is it for investment? Is it for speculation? Is it for construction of your family home? Why do you want to buy it, and why do you want to buy it where you want to buy it? Once you've answered those questions, then look for these properties. Where are they? Either from the land selling companies or from an individual. Then undertake to visit the site for the property that you have identified that you want. Go to the ground, see the property actually exists, meet the owner of that property in person. It is vital to meet the owner. It may seem quite outdated, but there's some familiarity with certain interactions, and you're able to pick up on things when you have a conversation with people. Then on site, you can look at the layout of the area. What
what you're looking for.
Is it what you're looking for? What is the landscape? What are the amenities around? How are the roads like? Do you have electricity, water? Just the whole picture. And then from then, you can start initiating the discussion with the seller on how to go about the buying of that particular parcel of land. What do they expect from you? How much are they looking at for the purchase price? How long do they have a ready title for that particular plot? How long do they expect that purchase price from you within? Then you can now move the discussion to actually getting documentation from the seller. There is several documentation that is key that you need to get from the seller of the property, and that will, if depending on whether you're buying from an individual or a company.
So, and also cut you short. You have said about the price. You, as an advocate, do you bargain on behalf of the buyer that you're representing, or is it up to the buyer and the seller to agree on the price?
Out of personal experience, I do not, because what you reduce into writing is what the parties have agreed. I am just a facilitator, and I'll reduce into writing what the parties have agreed. So it is for you to get the best deal you can for that property, unless you have explicitly asked me to do that, and is part of the engagement that we're going to have. Then I would steer away from those discussions. I will only reduce whatever you have agreed into writing. Yes.
Then I think that's okay. Then from there we can proceed on to the legal process. Where do we start after we have done the site visit? And we have identified the buyer, everything is in check, we have met the parcel.
Now, of course, you are buying a parcel of land. The parcel of land has to have an identification document. That document will be the title deed, or certificate of title, or certificate of lease, depending on the tenure of ownership of that particular property. So you need to get the title document for that particular property. A copy would suffice, complete copy with all the pages and all the entries. And with that document, you are able now to start your due diligence journey. You're able to go to the lands office and request for a search. You're able to request for a green card search or a route search over that property. You're able to go to the survey office and buy a registry index map. And that will help you identify and get to know more about that property, whether it has issues, and whether the seller is the actual owner. Document number 2 is the identification documents of the seller, their ID and their KRA pin. If it's a company, their certificate of incorporation and its KRA pin. Those will help you be able to identify the seller vis-a-vis the searches you're able to conduct at the different government offices. If it's a company, you go to the company's registry and you're able to conduct a search on that particular property. Now, if you're buying land that has come out of a subdivision, you need to get the mutation. So the mutation is a layout, because in broken down, mutation is mutate, it's to grow and multiply. So the mutation form shows what the original parcel of land was and how many parcels have resulted from that particular singular parcel. And you have your documents and you can begin your due diligence process.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the first thing you're supposed to look at once you've done the search? What are you supposed to confirm?
So you go to the land registry, you get a copy of the title,
Yes.
you attach your copies of ID and KRA pin, and you fill out the application for the search. You submit that to the lands office,
Yes.
and they give you a search showing the most recent entries on that particular title document.
Okay.
It is not a comprehensive overview,
Yes.
but it is the most recent entries on that particular property as held by the lands office.
Okay.
To go further as to the history, you've had me mention a root search or a green card search.
Yes, I would search.
So you need to write a letter, or your advocate in this case will write a letter to the lands office
Yes.
and request that they be given a green card extract of the green card that is held within the lands office.
Yes.
Now, the green card is a register for that property as held by the lands office from the date that parcel began existing under the number it has. So all entries, all dispositions, all transactions will be noted on that green card. If it has been transferred severally, it will be indicated. If it had a caution or a caveat registered at some point or a court order, then it is going to be indicated. So you request for that extract, then you get it and you examine it. Now, you read that extract together with the search and the details contained on the title. Your title document has 3 portions. Of course, you have the face, but when you flip over, we are talking about a title deed here.
Yes.
It has a property section. It describes the property, the tenure of ownership, the details of when the register for the property was opened, the registration block, and the parcel number, the acreage. All those details are contained there. Then you go to Part B.
Yes.
Part B is just slightly lower. It contains the proprietorship section rather. Proprietorship section. This one tells you who the owner of that property and in what capacity they own that land.
Okay.
When they were registered as the owner will also be indicated there. Then you go to the encumbrance section of that title. The encumbrances are things that forbear on a property, in the sense that if you have a caution, if you have a charge, they are going to be registered on that particular portion of the title. So if all these 3 documents tally, and we're going to use Kevin as an example, and Kevin is the actual owner. There are no encumbrances noted on the title. When the register was opened, tallies with the green card and whatever is noted on the title. There are no errors on these 3 documents.
Yes.
Then you have passed your first step of due diligence.
Okay.
You go to number 2.
Yes.
You go to the survey office, either at the Survey of Kenya or at the district survey office
All county level.
or county level.
Yes.
Then you buy a registry index map.
Yes.
The registry index map shows you the location of your property as against other properties, right?
Yes.
So if it needs to indicate and show you your property on the ground, you're able to go with that registry index map to the ground and be able to place your property on where it is.
Okay.
Now, those registry index maps are, I think you can get it for about 500 shillings or thereabouts.
Yes.
And they're public records.
Yes.
So they're large maps, carbon copies,
Yes.
and they're fairly easy to read and interpret.
Okay.
You could go further
Yes.
and instruct a surveyor,
A land surveyor.
a land surveyor.
Yes.
Handed that document,
Yes.
the land surveyor is able to go to the ground,
Yes.
then look at the
The
parcel,
Yes.
and look at the measurements, the acreage of that property, look for the beacons of that property, and where they are, whether they're on the ground or not, and he could even affix them for you depending on what will be reduced in contract later with the seller. But I find it important that you need to get a surveyor, so they're able to confirm the acreage for you, that the beacons are in place, that the boundaries of that property are actually correct, and lastly, that what is contained on the title tallies with whatever the survey office has in relation to your property.
Okay.
So that in landscape is what is due diligence over the property.
Yes. So
Then
it's the search.
You do the search,
Yes.
you do the route search,
Yes.
then you do survey due diligence
Okay.
by getting the registry index map and instructing a surveyor
Surveyor.
to actually visit the ground and survey the property for any variations as to measurements, that is acreage, and ascertainment of the boundaries and the beacons on the ground. Yes.
So up to that point, we have already established that you have done the due diligence. So from the due diligence, you have confirmed that the seller is actually now the owner of the property. You have confirmed that the land is there. So how do you proceed from there?
Now, we had mentioned the issue of whether the owner is a company or an individual.
Yes, yes.
So if it's a company, you need to do a CR12,
Yes.
which is a company search done on a citizen.
Yes.
So you're able to establish the directorship of the company and the shareholding of the company and whether the company exists,
Yes.
if at all. Then once you're satisfied and the other records tally, then you're good to go. You have crossed your first phase of due diligence and your parcel exists and the person you're dealing with is the owner, or the company you're dealing with is the owner. Then you progress that discussion now to the contract phase.
Yes.
We need to reduce everything in writing.
Yes.
You have, you're legally bound
Yes.
for purchases and for sales and purchases of land to reduce your understandings in writing,
Yes.
and those understandings have to be witnessed.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So you need, for sales of land, you need a contract,
Yes.
reducing those terms, and it has to be in writing. Otherwise, you will not be able to enforce your rights
Yes.
if anything goes awry
Okay.
during that process.
Okay.
Yes.
So I would say now this is the phase mostly you engaged more as an advocate for the buyer, or what would you say about that?
Most people will engage an advocate from the outset.
Yes.
Because it's easier to deal with an advocate for the due diligence bit because they know what they're looking for,
Okay.
and they're able to pick out on the things that stand out.
Okay.
You may even be more proactive and engage the advocate prior.
Yes.
So they go to the site visit with you,
Okay.
they ask these questions,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So the earlier you engage an advocate,
The better.
the better,
Yes.
because if some things don't tally at the outset, the
Yes.
advocate may even interview the neighbors,
Yes.
if they are neighbors for those particular plots. If nothing tallies, you're able to say, look, don't proceed with this transaction. Let's not waste time and let's focus on a different property. So you will be engaged from the outset. Usually you will have something called a letter of engagement detailing what services are expected from you, breaking down the extent of the due diligence you want carried out. Will they be the ones to instruct a survey on your behalf? Will you meet those costs? The contract stage of the process, then the registration of the transfer eventually to your name and in your favor, and a title being issued in your name. So it details the whole process. So having due diligence and everything checking out, you proceed to reduce everything into the contract.
Yes.
So what had you agreed as the purchase price?
Yes.
What is this property that we are selling? Let us identify it correctly in the agreement. How do we pay this money?
Yes, yes, definitely. How do you pay?
How does the seller expect to be paid? Within what period does the seller expect to be paid?
Yes.
At what point do you get possession over this property?
Yes.
Does the property have any developments on top of it? Are they included in the sale? Does it have any movables? Are they included in the sale? Then you go down to the default provisions. What if you are unable to provide the purchase price within the period that you have agreed? What if the seller is unable to deliver the ownership documents, we call them completion documents,
Yes.
to you within the timelines that have been agreed? What happens during those phases?
Yes.
So
it's properly documented in the contract.
it's properly documented.
Yes.
What documents will you be expecting from the seller?
Yes.
Those are the completion documents that you exchange for the balance of the purchase price.
Okay.
Yes.
From your experience, I believe after now, as per the contract, what kind of payment agreements would you advise the buyers to pay?
Typically, we have the 10% at the outset, which is the deposit. Of course, a contract without consideration is not valid, so consideration has to pass.
Yes.
You decide, of course, you can vary it as depending on what the expectations of the seller are vis-a-vis to yours, but the standard is about 10%. And where will it be paid? Is it paid directly to the seller? Will it be paid to the seller's advocates if they have one? Will you be holding it as the advocates for the buyer on a stakeholder basis for the parties? These are things that you need to agree, but it is on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. There's something you've said about the seller now having an advocate. We have been talking about an advocate for the buyer. So can you also tell us maybe the functions of the advocate for the seller? What do they do? Because you have also been on the other side. What do you do?
So the prime objective of the seller's lawyer is to draw up the agreement for sale.
Okay.
Because the seller knows under what conditions
Yes.
they want to sell the property to any prospective buyer. So they draw up the agreement for sale.
Okay.
They will also be the liaison between you
Yes.
as the buyer's advocate and the buyer, the seller rather.
Yes.
So you go through them. So all discussions will be had between the advocates. So the vendor or the seller will communicate to their lawyer what they want,
Yes.
and the buyer is going to communicate to you what they want.
Okay.
So it's easier when professionals are discussing,
Yes,
because there is little emotion to the whole discussion.
Yes, true.
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing we forgot to mention, do you need a valuation of the property as you discuss the price? Is it part of the agreement of the buyer and the seller's agreement? Do you need a valuation or?
Now that is on a case-by-case basis. It is on depending on the individual.
Yes.
Some buyers will want to conduct a valuation, so they'll instruct a valuer themselves.
Okay.
So they know they're paying just about market,
Yes.
or slightly above market rate,
Yes.
and they can use that to negotiate the purchase price with the seller. So you see, you can sell your property for whatever value you want. If you want 1 million for your parcel of land that is worth 10 million, it is entirely up to you. If you sell it for 15 but the current value is 10, well, congratulations.
Yes, willing buyer,
Willing buyer, willing seller. So you'll find that mostly for commercial properties, because they are quite expensive. They're on the high side, and you want to know what the markup is on what you're buying, and to get good value for your money. So you don't have to, you don't buy a project and it is not appreciating in value.
True.
Yes.
Yes, you need value for your money.
Correct.
So the other thing, we have talked about the price. You have said you pay the 10% as the deposit, so that now the process starts. So maybe give us some timelines, or maybe when do you pay the other payments, or at what stage do you make the other payments?
So parties are going to agree on
As per the contract, that is.
the commercial terms of the sale, and usually the 10% is paid on or before the execution of the agreement. If the amount is slightly above 1 million or next to 1 million, you need evidence of the source of funds. So it's advised that the contract is signed, and then you pay the deposit onwards to the nominated account, which is easily and is more prudently should be provided in that agreement. So there is no doubt as to where the money went,
Yes.
because people nominate different accounts for where the money is going to be paid, and then receipt is acknowledged in that same agreement. Then you move forward to stamping that agreement.
Okay.
So once you've crystallized the terms and you've paid the deposit, you need that document franked.
Okay.
So franking is where you take it to the Ministry of Lands, and it is embossed with a stamp, with a revenue stamp, which makes that agreement admissible as evidence in court.
Yes.
And it is important that you do it, and then you retain a copy for your records. Now, in the contract for sale, the breakdown as to how payments are going to be made is guided by the needs of the seller and the readiness of both parties, in the sense that we have something called a completion date. The completion date is the date when the balance of the purchase price, whatever percentage it may be, maybe 90, maybe 80, maybe 50, whatever it is exchanged for completion documents, right? These completion documents are what? These are the original title. This is the signed transfer, transferring the property to the purchaser. This is the affidavit of spousal consent, if the seller is an individual, rather. These are the certified copies of IDs and KRA pins of the seller. This includes a route map to the property. It assists when you're going to do the valuation. And you have colored passport photographs of the seller. So those are the completion documents. These are the documents that would enable you as a buyer be able to transfer the property to your name without reference to the seller. So that is the completion date. Most agreements will have 90 days as a completion date. That varies, however, because if the seller is ready, I forgot, the other document is a land control board consent. Land control board consent if the property is agricultural. If it is not, then you don't need land control board consent, say if it's a leasehold property. Some registries will require a commissioner's consent, although that was scrapped. You're still going to find those instances where they'll ask you to provide. So you can provide for that just in case that comes up. There's also rates and rent clearances. Rates are paid to the county. Land rent is paid to the government. Land rent is explicitly for leasehold properties, and land rates are payable on both properties, freehold or leasehold properties. Yes, so you need confirmation that the rates and land rent have been paid up to the date you're buying the property, because some properties have really huge rate bills and rent bills, and you don't want to be inheriting that.
Okay, so it's always good to make sure that the rates.
The seller, yes, yes.
Before the transfer.
Yes.
Okay, you have said something else about the consent. Maybe you can dive into that a little bit.
Spousal consent is mandatory for properties, for sales that include or relate to matrimonial property. Now, what matrimonial property is defined under the Matrimonial Properties Act, and the definition is quite expansive. And because it is very difficult for you to interrogate all relationships and how properties were acquired and the whole lot, it is prudent that it is included. It is a mandatory requirement when you present in your documents at the land registry, because there has been so many issues where one spouse sells off a property and it is a matrimonial home, or it is where they live. So where the property has been bought by proceeds from pulled together by both spouses, but one sells it off, then it becomes a long-standing court battle, and you are caught in between as a buyer. So it is prudent that it is provided, also to ensure that the transfer goes on smoothly and there are no issues that arise after. Yes.
So from there also, maybe you have mentioned the freehold and the leasehold. I
Yes.
think we should have defined those types of land, or what we call them.
So in Kenya we have two land 10 years, 10 years of ownership of land. You have leasehold and freehold.
Yes.
So I'll start with leasehold. So leasehold basically means you own the property as a lessee from either the county or the government for 99 years or whatever period will be indicated on your lease, subject to payment of a particular amount of rent annually for that particular property. With freehold property, you own it absolutely in your name, and you are not entitled to pay land rent to anybody because it is yours. Yeah, so you get to pay land rent for leasehold properties. You don't get to pay land rent for freehold properties.
So you have done your search, you have done your due diligence. So from there you move on to the contract. Then from the contract you go to the payments. Then after the 90 days is when you get the completion documents. The completion documents here being now the title, being what else?
The completion documents are the title document.
Yes.
In the name of the seller.
Now in the name of the seller.
In the name of the seller.
Okay.
You have the transfer,
Yes.
Usually in triplicate,
In the name of the seller or the buyer?
signed by the seller in
Okay.
favor of the purchaser,
buyer.
the
Okay.
buyer.
Okay.
And then you have, if it's whole property and agricultural, you have the land control that property to you.
Yes.
Then you're going to have the affidavit of spousal consent if the seller is an individual. You're going to have certified copies of identification documents, that is ID, KRA PIN. If it's a company, the certificate of incorporation and ID, KRA PIN of the directors and the KRA PIN for the company. Then you have that route map for the property that will help when you're going to conduct valuation. The passport photograph photos, colored, of the seller, if a company, of the directors of the seller. And you need the rates and rent clearance certificates depending on the tenure of ownership of the property to confirm that the rates are fully paid up and the land rent is fully paid up if applicable.
Okay. Maybe from your experience, tell us of instances where the completion documents were not delivered and have already paid the 10%. How would you go about it? Or what would hinder me not get my completion documents after I've paid the 10%?
Now, the obligation to provide the completion documents lies with the seller.
Yes.
The seller is obligated to provide a clean title that can be passed to you,
Yes.
and your obligation is to, as a buyer, is to provide the funds,
Yes.
the consideration for the purchase of the land.
Yes.
So the buyer, with the advocates or by themselves, collects all these
Okay.
completion documents
Yes.
and puts them together.
Okay.
Now, the completion documents that need to be sourced from a government office, he needs to apply for and get.
Okay.
So he needs to have the original title.
Okay.
If that does not exist, it was either lost
Yes.
or misplaced.
Yes.
And that ought to have been disclosed either at the outset,
Yes.
or if when lost, maybe things happen during the transaction and
Yes.
maybe it is misplaced or burnt down, then that needs to be disclosed a bit earlier. Then you can work on remedying that fact by getting a replacement.
Yes.
If you're still interested in proceeding with the transaction, say the land control board consent, he needs to appear before the land control board consent, which needs to satisfy itself
Yes.
as to the seller being aware of the transaction they are undertaking and the consequences thereof, and who the buyer is.
Okay.
Because currently there's a limitation on who can buy freehold land. Foreigners cannot buy freehold land
Okay.
in their own capacity,
Okay.
because these are controlled transactions, and most of those lands are primarily used for agricultural purposes.
Yes.
Yes. So in the event the seller is unable to provide these documents to you, there needs to be a provision in the agreement as to what happens in such a circumstance. And more often than not is a completion notice. Usually 21 days, could be shorter, could be longer, telling the purchaser, look, I am ready to complete, the seller rather, I am ready to complete, I have the balance of the purchase price with me, the 90-day period is up. Let us have these documents, or your confirmation that you have these documents within the next 21 days. In the event that that is not provided, then let us have a refund of the 10% that we had paid to you. And sometimes there are penalties that are included. You may charge interest, you may also have the 10% returned to you with another penalty on top of the forfeiture amount that is being returned to you. So it is what would have been stated in the agreement for sale. Depends on a case-by-case basis, per circumstance, per agreement by the parties.
So the other thing, I think now once you get your completion documents, now the land is yours. Or
No.
is there anything else you need to do?
Once you get the completion documents, your advocates are going to inspect them and confirm that they're actually in order.
Okay.
And then you proceed to the land's office with these documents.
Okay.
So the seller, the buyer signs a transfer on their part. They provide their copies of IDs and KRA PIN, the same are certified, and the documents are dated and completed. Then you proceed to the land's office.
Okay. So
At
this
the
is after the 90 days.
Once your advocates have received the completion documents and the balance has been paid to the seller.
Okay.
So at the land's office, the first step is the government valuer's office.
Okay.
So the government valuer is going to conduct a valuation.
Yes.
We call it assessment and endorsement of stamp duty on the transfer. This helps you know what stamp duty is payable on that instrument. Stamp duty is the obligation of the purchaser.
Yes.
Capital gains tax is the obligation of the seller. So stamp duty is paid at either 2% or 4% of the value assigned by the government valuer. Now, the interesting bit is the valuer will use the higher of the value you have indicated on your transfer or the actual value as assessed by him.
Okay.
Never lower.
Never lower.
The higher of. So if you're buying the property for 3 million,
yes,
and he assesses it at 3.5 million, yes, you're going to pay stamp duty at 3.5 million.
Okay.
If you have indicated on your transfer at 3 million, but he assesses the value of the property at 2.8 million, you will pay stamp duty on the 3 million.
Okay.
It's on the higher of.
It's on the higher of.
So what determines on whether you pay 4% is with the location of the property. So urban areas you pay 4%, rural areas you pay 2% stamp duty. So you go onto the iTax of the buyer, or the buyer goes into the iTax system. They generate that payment slip at the assessed rate, pays the stamp duty. You can do it on M-Pesa or via bank.
Yes.
Then you take the documents for franking.
Yes.
So the franking, they'll endorse and emboss the duty, on the full duty on the original,
yes,
and the 20 shillings duty on the counterparts, because documents are submitted in triplicate.
okay,
Once franked, you submit all your documents. That is the original title, the transfer, the payment slips, the consent, the spousal consent, to the registry for registration. Now, the registrar is going to register the transfer, then cancel the title in the seller's name and have another issued in your name on the date the transfer was registered.
yes,
Such that what you get from the land registry is a new title in your name as the buyer, counterparts of the transfer. Now, that depends on the kind of tenure of the property. But you get a counterpart of the transfer registered in your favor, and now the property is yours. You go further and conduct a search on that title that you've gotten to confirm that indeed it is in my name and the records in the register tally. Your names are captured correctly, your ID number is captured correctly, and you just confirm there is no discrepancies. And now you can put your title in a safe space together with the copies of the transactional documents in case there are questions asked down the road, or if you ever need to prove ownership, because titles get lost. And if you need to reconstruct a register, yes, the copy of your title is important, so scan it and place it on a cloud.
yes.
And these transfer documents might help you if there is ever a question as to ownership, who signed the documents, when was this contracted. Just place them safely.
Okay.
Yes.
So maybe just maybe of a clarification, you have said the land buying process will take 90 days. So it's 90 days plus now the time you wait for your own title, correct?
It could take 90 days or longer. Usually the proviso on the completion date is 90 days or such earlier date as the parties may agree. As I said, it all depends on the readiness of the parties. So if the seller is ready with the documents,
yes,
you can complete in 30 days.
Okay.
If the purchaser is also ready with the purchase price, you could complete in 10, 15 days. The sooner he gets the documents, the sooner you have the purchase price, you can exchange that, because you have sales where no consideration is exchanged at the outset. They get the documents, you get the completion documents, they're exchanged at once. Such that you get the money, you get the documents, you proceed to registration almost immediately.
Okay.
Most sales are governed by the LSK conditions of sale, which provide for these timelines that we're talking about, which could always be varied by the parties according to how they see fit, yes, and depending on the kind of transaction they have on their hands.
Okay. Something else that maybe you can explain on, most of these adverts on the medias, they normally say that they give titles, and you see them saying that they have a day that they're going to be issuing titles. Maybe you can explain on that. Is it possible for somebody to trust these companies to deliver titles on that particular day, or maybe what can you say on that?
No, it would not be right to chastise all these land selling companies, yes, because we have some good ones, yes, and we have some bad ones. Yes. And when they say they're going to give you a title, more often than not, their advocates take charge of that process, from drawing up the agreement for sale,
Yes.
to managing the payments, to getting the completion documents, to the registration, and to you getting a title at the end. So they will charge you for that entire process.
They will charge you that entire process.
For that entire process.
Yes.
And the rationale for doing it in such a manner is because it is more cost efficient as opposed to people doing it individually. And you'll find that for plots that are not extremely expensive,
Yes.
and would be for the lower middle class or the middle class, and of course cost is a very great factor.
Okay. So mostly what you should advise them is, maybe if you're buying land from a company as a group or as many people, you should engage your own personal lawyer or advocate to go through the entire document.
It is important to have a professional working with you through that journey.
Yes.
Because these agreements are not drawn to protect your rights.
Yes.
They are drawn to protect the seller's rights.
Yes.
And so enforcing your rights should anything go awry becomes a bit difficult on your part.
Yes.
Engaging a surveyor is also critical.
Yes.
Because you need to ascertain the boundaries and the beacons.
Yes.
So engaging professionals is highly encouraged.
Yes.
Because land is quite a costly investment.
True.
Yes.
Okay, so on parting shot, maybe for people who are looking to buy land, people or businesses, what would you advise them?
Number one is do your due diligence.
Yes.
Engage professionals to work with you through that journey, and remove emotion from the land buying process.
Yes.
It's a costly element, but remove emotion from it. Take advice from the professionals you have, and get good professionals, because also the professionals that you engage will have a direct impact
Yes.
on the kind of service you get and the product you get at the end of it. So be sober about it. Engage sound professionals. If it's a lawyer, you can go on to the LSK website, the law search website. You're able to search the lawyer's credentials, whether they're licensed to practice for that particular year, whether they actually exist, because there is many that exist but are not in existence, and they are not legitimate.
Yes.
They are not licensed to practice, or they may be advocates that have been struck off or are suspended for whatever reason, or are not compliant for that particular year and don't have the practicing certificate. Also, take your time. Hurrying through these things rarely goes well.
Yes. It takes time.
It takes time. Of course, pulling together money, which is
Yes,
the
the
resource,
resources.
it takes longer than
Yes.
it is to spend. So take your time, walk through that journey, and eventually you get a title at the end of the process.
Maybe something else you should go over from somebody now who's not buying land, they're buying apartments. How maybe can they go about it?
Now,
Apartments or off-plan projects, maybe just dive into it.
that is actually a very nice question, because you have so many brochures and so many advertisements
Yes.
on apartments and the sale of apartments, and there's two prime ways of selling apartments currently. So you have off-plan purchases,
Yes.
and you have actual apartments that have been constructed and they're standing. So off the plan means it is off a plan and a design that has been showed to you by a developer.
Yes.
You will find the sales are structured in a sense or in a way that you get to pay money in installments.
Yes.
As they are proceeding with the construction of that particular apartment block, or be it maisonettes, whatever it is. And then at the end of the process, you are supposed to get a house or an apartment.
Yes.
When you contrasting that with where one exists,
Yes.
that would be an outright sale between a developer who's showing you an apartment that already exists, so you're able to examine the defects and all that, and the finishes. You're able to actually feel and experience the unit you want to buy before you actually enter into the contract. Now, off-plan purchases are they are quite incentivized because you may get apartments at good rates, and by the time the apartments are the construction is getting completed, you have the value of the unit has appreciated. You also have the benefit of choosing the unit. Will it be facing the sunset, the sunrise? What will it be overlooking? You get that benefit. You may even have the ability to design and make some tweaks to the apartment to your own specifications. Now, so the benefits are there for off-plan purchases, but there has been tons of projects that have never gone to fruition. So they stall midway, and you've sunk a lot of money into it. So you find that there is an element of fraud. It became too expensive to construct the premises, so they stopped midway, or the developers misappropriated the funds and disappeared, or the quality of finishes for the product you get at the end of it is not what you expected. So you have to balance the benefits and the negatives of an off-plan purchase. But all in all, it is still an acquisition of a property. So due diligence is key. You need to look at the developer. What is their track record? Is it the first time? Also, you need to look at the approvals for that particular development. Does it have all the approvals? Does it have the NEMA approvals? Does it have NCA approvals?
The county government approvals.
County government approvals. Look at the building plans. It is important for you to inspect these things, confirm that it is a sound development, the professionals engaged are actually licensed. Then on the land where it is being built, is it owned by the developer, or what is the arrangement behind that?
Yes, because that's something most buyers don't know, who owns the land.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then you have a scenario where is a developer mortgaging the land to be able to build the apartment. So you need to be aware of the model of financing being used by the developer to put up those.
Before investing in the project.
Yes, because if you're relying on the deposits by the people buying, assuming COVID hits or there's a cash crunch, and the 80 people that are buying from you are no longer able to make the payments as agreed, then the development will have to halt. If it is financed, there is a high chance that the development will proceed because there is some monitoring aspect by the lender. That, however, may present a challenge in its own at the point of getting a title, because your unit needs to be discharged by the lender. Right? So you need to weigh all these things. As I said, engage the professional, have some discussion about these things, remove emotion from it, and hopefully at the end of it, you get a decent product and you get what you paid for.
True.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe thank you, Edward, for the information. I'm sure the bottom line is invest with professionals.
Use professionals in your investments, and always ask questions, interrogate as many things as you want, and hopefully the result of it is an honest answer and a good product at the end. Yes.
Okay, so maybe as for you as an advocate, would you like people to get in touch with you?
Yes, I think we will have the details running.
Yes, below the section.
Running, but yes, if you need any professional advice on acquisition of a property, that be it a barren piece of land, an apartment, a development, a maisonette, across the country, we're able to help. So please get in touch, and we will be glad to work with you through that journey.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you for your time.
Asante sana.